Hi guys, this is the third part to my human trafficking transnational adoption series. It's taken a minute to film this video because I've been trying to wrap my head around so much information these last couple of weeks with everything that's the Supreme Court has been doing. I'm not entirely sure how, but the right people are in place for these things to happen. So definitely gotta get in contact and get those people out of office because they're working against us at this point. I understand their beliefs and all that, but religion and law are just very different, you know. If you're ready, let's just get into it. So in my last video, I talked about the criteria for human trafficking, which is exploitation, which really anybody can be exploited. If you're uneducated or unaware of other options, then you may be susceptible to be exploited just off that fact. Forced labor and debt bondage. Human trafficking is a form of modern day slavery. People are aware that what happened 300 years ago is still very much prevalent today with convict leasing programs and what I suspect to be the adoption system. There's context to everything. There's pros and cons. Not every situation's the same. I completely understand this, but when it's finding patterns within history, I feel like it's good to bring up. So in the late 1800s, labor's contracts looked something like this, stating you were unable to leave. Some people were locked in at night. You had to obey commands, talk only in a service-like manner or polite, and accept just any punishment that comes. All in the meanwhile, freedmen at this time were unfortunately uneducated and could not read, so they were unaware of what they were really signing, which still goes on very much today in our legal court system. So yeah, which is kind of why we need lawyers, and self-representation is so heavily looked against. So yeah, that's why. The lack of humanity in these labor contracts, combined with fixed wages, made it so it was extremely difficult to achieve a level playing field with their employers, which ultimately led to being underpaid and exploited. These documents paved the way for contracts we still sign today in some right-to-work states. One misunderstanding or difference can get you let go of. Some, if not most, employment agencies make so much money off being the connect or the middleman, if you will. They won't directly tell you that they make a percentage off your hourly rate, and because you're not working for that corporation, you may not receive benefits for your time. You don't get sick days accrued, and at the end of the 6 months, if the corporation isn't hiring because there's a plethora of ready-to-work people at the agency, you can't discuss pay wage. And in some emergency cases, that could penalize you. And with all that being said, if you were to miss a day or get written up, you just have to date, sign with a smile. And on the flip side, in the prison system, inmates could be subjected to mandatory community service, which could entail harsh blistering heat or the bitter cold. These people collect cents compared to the actual revenue collected by the detention center or the correctional centers. Not entirely sure how or what they're correcting using those kind of methods. I saw people in vests on the side of the road, on the highway, where cars are going 70, potentially 90 to 100 miles an hour, just picking up trash. And I understand how that could be degrading, but that you're putting somebody's physical safety at risk. Those people speed all the time and accidents happen. People are aware that the prison system is corrupt. It's because of the abuse and authority. People gain a title and just assume control over other people because of that title or whatever they wield. In our social hierarchy, it happens everywhere, all the time. There's context and circumstances, like obviously if somebody has an educated background and they've been doing this for like 20 plus years, you obviously want their 2 cents, their consejos, but you should listen to those people. But even seen in human trials and human experiments, that when people just get any kind of authority over somebody else, that sense of entitlement, it blows people's brains out of proportion. Like the ego just boosted. Let's look to see how close these labor contracts are to high intensity stress desk jobs. I understand, polar worlds, but we're gonna get to it. Unable to leave, okay? At high intensity desk jobs, every minute is monitored. Every call is monitored. Locked in, some bathroom breaks can't be longer than 5 minutes, going and coming. That blows my mind. God forbid you ate something that doesn't agree with you and you have to just spend 7 minutes in the bathroom making sure that everything's tidy. That can get you penalized. That can get you let go of. Like, you have to obey commands. How many times has somebody been told that their hair is unprofessional? That they need to tame it, they need to lock it down, they need to be more presentable in the workspace, they need to do this, that, and a third. How many times? How many times are people silenced about misconduct? They see something, they want to say something, but then they're silenced or they're let go of because either they're causing too much commotion or asking too many questions. I hate to say it, but mandatory overtime. Everybody loves overtime except when it's mandatory. Like, you at least want to give people the impression that it's their free will, you know? They're already working 12 hours. Usually it's in factory environments. So these people are getting off like a 12-hour shift, 10-hour shift, and then they have like a 4 to 6 hour mandatory overtime. That doesn't sound right. So some people are potentially working 14 to 18 hours straight. And then just additional tasks that you don't get compensated for. Obviously, you want to help somebody out when you can, but it's when that sense of entitlement and being taken advantage of comes into play. That's what I'm talking about. Must speak in a service-like tone or just very polite. Again, if you were to say something because you saw something, you might be seen as complaining or asking too many questions. Even when it comes to negotiating wages, for some reason it's seen as if they're doing somebody a favor, and sometimes it's seen as it's literally coming out of their paycheck instead of it being a conversation about experience, about credentials, about taking on additional tasks. Like, it's, for some reason, it's always a favor. It's never an actual negotiation. It's not a conversation. And again, I understand that there's context and circumstances and not every business runs their business the same, which is great. I'm glad not every place is the same. But we have to monitor the places that are doing the misconduct and then accepting all punishments. So let's say by the end of the conversation, there's some misunderstanding going on. They take it as you're disrespecting them, that you're crossing a line, whatever it may be. You must sign, date that paper with a smile. Because if you don't, that could be seen as insubordinate. That could be seen as more disrespect. So you really got to be careful on how you bring up negotiations, on how you bring up certain topics, on how you say something after you've seen something. So yeah, labor contracts that were in the past pave the way for what we have today. How you can be so easily let go of for what seems like nothing. Not every desk job is like this, and I don't want it to seem like I'm coming after somebody's 9 to 5. I've been the one that's been uneducated. I've been the one that lacked awareness. I've been that person that just got their world flipped upside down. So what can we do? We try to call HR because maybe it's just a misunderstanding. We try to call the labor board because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And I in no way want to come off as complaining or ungrateful or entitled or anything, but I just want people to know their power, know their strengths and their rights that they have. Because I refuse to be taken advantage of again. I refuse to let somebody be taken advantage of because they're young, they're impressionable, or they just don't know. And because I like to play devil's advocate, I just wanted to look up the definition of torture. The definition is the intentional infliction of suffering not defined by pain. Okay, just keep this in mind. as a means of preventative measure, intimidation, or penalty. So let's see what the US's torture program is, the CIA's torture program. Stress positions, standing or sitting for prolonged hours. So there's scientific studies done proving that staring at a screen for 6 to 8 hours a day causes depression, causes your joints and muscles to ache. So I would say that's a pretty stressful position to be in for a long time. There's studies. There are studies. Short shackled, meaning you're confined to a small area or a big area, but you can't leave from this small area, hence the short shackling. So even if you were in a whole big office with 50 other people in a call center, you can't leave your desk for longer than 5 minutes. It's so weird. It's so weird. You really have to read the contracts because stupid stuff can get you caught up like that. It's ridiculous. So stress positions, short shackling, and sleep deprivation brought on by stress or just working more, which I think everybody's been there. Whaling and waterboarding were also on the list, but replace physical whaling with a hostile environment so your nervous system is a wreck, and waterboarding with shoveling sustenance down your throat before you're late from your 30-minute lunch, if you even get 30 minutes, if you're lucky, because I've been told that I can only receive 20-minute lunches and that 30 minutes is against policy, and then I would get fired for that, even though the labor board literally says it, that we're mandatory allowed 30-minute lunches at least. But what do I know, right? The rise and grind generation is so focused on monetary value because that's the thread that holds this whole corporate reality together. So people work and work and work, and they still can't afford emergency bills, let alone time off. With everything that's going on in our nation, it feels impossible to try and grasp some control over what we can. And that's why I support local businesses. I support small businesses. I'm actively pursuing my dreams in case that one day I can't. Like, it's a scary thought, but like, they're coming for our rights. It's not just exploiting women at this point. It's not just women's rights. It's everyone's right to privacy, to bodily autonomy, to everything. Everything. If you're not careful and you land yourself in jail, that possibly, restricts your rights. If you're a felon, you can't vote, you can't own guns, you can't protect yourself. Like, we really have to be careful because who knows, everything is up in the air. I want to help create a world where people still check in on their neighbors, where people still, if they have extra vegetables, then they, pass it around to their family, their friends. I want people to still care about each other, feel close, as opposed to a corporation that really sees people as expendable, and they're so far removed at this point from what people nowadays are experiencing. Everybody wants a cushy lifestyle. I understand that. Everybody, that sounds great. But we can't lose sight of what the underprivileged people experience, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that sadly get taken advantage of because either they're uneducated or they just are unaware that there's other options out there. I want to help people potentially create a legacy for their family who will in turn help others and repair separations that we either had a part of or unknowingly let happen, because when you think about it, it's kind of the same. The freedom for information is an ongoing battle, but we have the knowledge to know better and, most importantly, do better. I don't want to live in a society or raise my children in a world where everyone is trying to undermine everybody and just get one over on somebody off a technicality. I am heartbroken at the state of our nation. Everything the Supreme Court is doing is harming more than half the population, if not all of us. There is no integrity, there is no humanity. What they are doing is unconstitutional. So we see their tactics. We've seen how they've employed them in the history and what they've tried at washing away. It's still prevalent. And sadly, they're even going after ICWA. So, genocide and assimilation is still very much rampant. June 24th, 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned, the day bodily autonomy became illegal. For centuries, America has been separating families and pushing forth their positive eugenics movement. And we're not going to discuss what positive eugenics are because I think it's pretty obvious what they're looking for, what is desirable in culture appropriation. Period. Children in adoptive care are often seen as a commodity, labeled to the public as forgotten children or lost ones. ICWA is in place so that doesn't happen. Reunification should be the only main goal, the highest of top priorities. Tearing these kids away and assimilating them into white homes with now white names creates an identity rift that could result in resentment, dissociative or personality problems, and substance abuse. A lot of cases are sealed so these kids have no ties to their culture, heritage, or family. There's a lot of inner turmoil on both sides. Native Americans make up 40% of human trafficking victims, yet only make up maybe less than 10% of the overall population. That's wild. The government moved these tribes to reservations after attempting a genocide. 50 years later, 2/3 of the sacred land was taken, creating interpersonal problems between tribes. With so much conflict and chaos ensued by America, the nations were left to cope with empty nests. Allegedly, authorities surrounding the areas may have been affiliated with drug dealers who have taken advantage of natives by luring them to either use or sell drugs. I've seen it in documentaries, I've heard stories, I've seen a couple articles. If the government really did sell crack in the 80s and created the whole world war on drugs, don't you think that they could possibly still be doing that just to other people? The media perpetrated rampant drug use to enforce separating families and dismantling the self-governing nation. Roe v. Wade is a protective clause. It's the right to privacy. Marginalized groups and disabled communities are going to be heavily impacted. People in conservatorships or deemed incompetent may be subjected to forced sterilization or compulsory sterilization, as the government calls it, because autonomy is illegal at this point and it would be seen as a preventative measure. In 2020, just 2 years ago, there was a huge concern over the alarming number of hysterectomies performed at the immigration facilities by ICE. Asylum seekers were taken advantage of and coerced into having procedures done that they were most likely not fully educated on, let alone told the extent of. These people were Hispanic refugees, and their stories are still coming out. So don't you think for a second that you can sleep soundly at night for what you did. Causing them to be infertile, minority groups, people in prison, patients at psych wards who are minority groups, people in prison, patients at psych wards who already have limited rights may be the most vulnerable at the moment. 1 in 4 pregnancies result in a miscarriage, causing for speculation of their integrity. These women are going through a life-altering moment, something so heart-wrenching. And again, if they get convicted, who knows the sentence, but they're trying to make the penalty so much more worse on the women. What's the reason that the government's possibly doing this? Firstly, positive eugenics, to erase generational trauma and disease. It's undeniable that African Americans are more at risk for heart disease and high blood pressure because generations that worked hard in those fields. Another reason is to avoid inconvenience of health insurance for mothers, aiding parents in maternity or paternity leave. Certain women, sex workers, and other marginalized groups, again, if they get convicted or if they're deemed incompetent for whatever reason, their rights get restricted. They may be forced to undergo compulsory sterilization. This stuff is so hard to talk about, let alone say. It deflects the US's inadequate measure to prevent and prosecute sexual abusers. There's ignorance on educating women about their bodies and cycles. Apparently there's 2-decade-year-old information about our cycles, how we go through like 3 or 4 cycles within a month. 2 decade years old, 20 years old. I'm about that age. Like, are you joking? What is the point of controlling a nation where everyone is unhealthy, unhappy, and kept in the dark? So semi-uneducated. So let's think about this real quick. There was this comedian that made a joke, I think it was like Bill Burr or something. But if Hitler based his genocide on American eugenics. So if Hitler's crazy movement actually, conquered, everybody would be walking around with defects. Everybody, because all those genes are swimming in the same pool. So there would be countless defects, mutations, you name it. And that's what would have resulted. That's what would have happened. And so if America is still trying to control population and trying to control genetics, people want peace. Peace of mind is a human right, which is why we have right to privacy, right to speech, right to bear arms, and trial by jury, etc. Like, this is why those laws were in place, for peace of mind. And right now, I don't understand how any of these senators, any of these justices, anybody can sleep soundly at night. I'm not entirely sure what the main end goal is to all this, other than restricting people's rights and just having total authoritarianism. But yeah, all I know is that there would be a lot of defects, a lot of mutations. So I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to fix this nation. But I think the more people that understand America's true history, that understand the present day, and understand that we have more information than we've ever had in the past. And the fight for freedom of information is an ongoing battle. So we constantly just have to make sure that human rights prevail over all. I understand that these people feel strongly because of their religious reasons, but again, religion and law, you have to keep them separate. Like, that's the whole basis of the Constitution, is keeping them separate. We have freedom of religion, which means we don't have to do it, but we can if we want to, because we have the freedom. So I hope you guys have a good day. I hope you guys stay educated, keep your eyes open, and have a great day. Don't let any of this dim your light, hurt your heart, any of that. Just remember that it's an ongoing battle, and we will win the war, and we will be okay. Okay? Okay. All right, sending good love and light. See you guys later. Bye.